Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. The Supreme Court knows they're starting to get into a position that is unsustainable. So they're breaking some rules, they're overreaching with their power, and now even one justice is out trying to urge lawyers to take on Trump. From Politico, rule of law is endangered, according to Chief Justice Roberts. When Roberts says the rule of law is endangered, he means a different rule of law than you may be thinking about. Just like the word racism, progressive groups have a way of redefining words and terms. John Roberts has been tied up with Norm Eisen. Norm Eisen is responsible for targeting Trump ever since the first administration, and he hasn't stopped since then. He's also been said to have been responsible for several color revolutions, things that we work on with the State Department and our intelligence agencies. So how could John Roberts be tied up with Norm Eisen? Well, the relationship between Chief Justice John Roberts and Norm Eisen, particularly regarding their collaboration on, quote, rule of law issues, has been a subject of discussion and some controversy. On their collaboration on rule of law, Chief Justice John Roberts and Norm Eisen, former U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic, reportedly collaborated on American and European rule of law issues with John Roberts. This collaboration included a week-long stay by Roberts at Eisen's residence in Prague, some 150-room mansion. Norm Eisen has stated that their collaboration focused on rule of law matters, and he defended Roberts against allegations of corruption related to this visit. Because obviously, if there was corruption between Chief Justice Roberts and Norm Eisen would have been involved in that corruption because it was his mansion. A little bit of self-preservation there. And this is only what we know about publicly. I'm sure there are some things that are going on that are outside my scope and my information sources. This is my YouTube channel. I'm not operating the FISA courts over here. Here are some concerns and criticisms about their relationship. The association and collaboration between Roberts and Eisen has sparked discussions and concerns about potential bias and impartiality of Roberts. Some social media posts have questioned the nature of their relationship and its potential impact on judicial integrity. So when Roberts is talking about the rule of law issues and endangering the rule of law, he's right. By the definition of the people in Washington that want to control the definition of the rule of law and change it into something else that's unrecognizable, like their definition for racism that excludes certain races from being racist, then yes, that version of the rule of law is endangered because the American people never signed up for that. We want the real rule of law, where everybody is treated equally. And we want the Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution, not make policy decisions. Speaking at Georgetown Law, Chief Justice John Roberts described the rule of law as endangered and warned against trashing the justices. But speaking in Washington Monday, he didn't point fingers directly at President Donald Trump or his allies for publicly excoriating judges who ruled against aspects of Trump's agenda. The federal district court judges are obviously way out of control. They're trying to protect their version of the rule of law, which is not the rule of law represented in our Constitution. John Roberts has no business being in public, making public statements, trying to defend what those judges are doing. He's got a lot of work to do back at the Supreme Court, and he owes a lot of answers to the Trump administration right now for matters that are in front of the Supreme Court. He's also well aware that these nationwide injunctions that are going on that are completely inappropriate, blocking the administration from normal policy decisions, is something that he could get stopped almost immediately. But he chooses not to do that because maybe Norm Eisen is telling him not to do that. Maybe he doesn't want to do that. And right now, they're just lucky that the current administration does not want to ignore judges and they will follow what judges are telling them to do, at least up until this point. Roberts said this, quote, "The notion that rule of law governs is the basic proposition," Roberts said during an appearance at Georgetown Law. "Certainly as a matter of theory, but also as a matter of practice. We need to stop and reflect every now and then how rare that is. Certainly rare throughout history and rare in the world today. If we have policy decisions that are inappropriately being blocked and also being made by local district judges on a nationwide basis for the entire country, when these judges were never elected in the first place to make these decisions, remember that's why we're getting policy decisions to help the public and to deal with issues in the country, because someone was actually elected to be president. And then they appointed people to run important divisions of the government, and they were Senate approved. It's not like the president even got to put everyone in place that he wanted to put in place to run all of the federal departments. These judges never lived up to that standard. They're just like local judges. There are hundreds of them, just under 700 of them. And none of them should have the power to control what goes on for the entire population of the United States. As many legal experts express grave concerns about Trump's attacks on law firms, and with several federal judges advancing inquiries into whether the administration is refusing to comply with court orders, Roberts took a longer-term view this Monday. He blamed schools for shortchanging civics education and leaving students with little understanding of the structure of U.S. government or the role of the courts. John may have to go back to civics lessons in his school to learn again the responsibilities and the limitations of the courts. The courts don't get to do literally whatever they want. We're not appointing kings and queens to the Supreme Court or to federal district benches for nationwide injunctions. We have 3 separate but co-equal branches. They don't all have the same jobs or the same authorities. It isn't everybody go do what you want to do, and whoever gets away with it, gets away with it. The executive runs the government and policy. Congress passes laws and controls the money. And the judicial branch makes sure that our rights are protected. Yes, there are some crossover issues with responsibilities, but it's not as much as they like to let on. Roberts suggested some recent verbal attacks on the justices had gone too far, but he gave no specific examples. Quote, "The court has obviously made mistakes throughout its history, and those should be criticized, so long as it is in the terms of the decision really, and not ad hominem against the justices. I just think that doesn't do any good," the Chief Justice said. It's about public opinion, and that's why Roberts is speaking about it. And Trump and the rest of the commentators have done a good job criticizing judges that are acting completely inappropriately. And they're not going to be given respect when they don't give the entire executive branch respect. They're going to be criticized for acting completely a fool. It's not the decision, it's the judge making the decision. That's why the judge is specifically criticized. In March, Roberts responded quickly when Trump called U.S. District Judge James Boasberg crooked and urged he be impeached for his rulings related to the administration's deportation of hundreds of men to a notorious prison in El Salvador. All of them administratively determined to be terrorists, illegal aliens, and not legally present in the country. This is where John Roberts first went off the rails and realized, I've got to start breaking some rules here. He said this from Bloomberg: Chief Justice Roberts rebukes Trump's call to impeach judges for rulings. Roberts said it was inappropriate to suggest that judges should be impeached. Well, even as the head of the judicial branch, the Supreme Court has no say over political decisions, and it would be a political decision to remove any judge through impeachment in Congress. It has nothing to do with the judicial branch, except for the judge that's getting impeached. It was never John Roberts' business to open his mouth about this, but he did do it. In a speech earlier this month, Roberts' most junior colleague, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, a Biden appointee, condemned threats and harassment that she said amounted to attacks on our democracy that ultimately risk undermining our Constitution and the rule of law. She's got no problem with nationwide injunctions, though, if you want to block the policy of the legitimately executive president of the United States. That's all good and fine, as long as it's a policy that she personally does not like. Roberts' public tone since Jackson's remarks has been notably less dire. At a judicial event in Buffalo last week, he repeated his earlier written statement opposing impeachment of judges over decisions, but passed up the opportunity to elaborate. Roberts assured the students Monday that the tense public atmosphere surrounding the judiciary and the fact that the justices disagree a lot hasn't led to the kind of toxic personal strife that has permeated the Supreme Court at various times in history. Quote, "We have to work together on these things that are difficult. You find a way to get along," Roberts said. "It's a long job. If you're sort of really at each other's throats with bad feelings and stuff like that, it's just not a good way to function. We do have to address some very, very difficult things, and we're the only people who are doing it. As long as John Roberts is having a good time while he's working, that's all we really care about. No, since he's trying to get the judicial branch to take over the executive branch, I don't care if he's having a bad day or not. I want him to actually do his job and protect our Constitution. Because if he does not do it, if the judicial coup continues, Trump will stand up and he will do something about it. He will fix this problem. He's not going to turn the country over to people who are exceeding their authority." Justice Sotomayor, who we also know is no genius, has been asking lawyers to stand up and fight against the administration. She said this at an ABA conference. Here's what she had to say. Sotomayor did not identify Trump or other office holders who have criticized his judge's rulings by name. Quote, our job is to stand up for people who can't do it themselves, and our job is to be the champion of lost causes, said the Associate Justice who joined the Supreme Court in 2009 after being nominated by President Barack Obama. Quote, but right now, we can't lose the battles we are facing, and we need trained and passionate and committed lawyers to fight this fight. Quote, with the uncertainty that exists at this moment, this is our time to stand up and be heard. For me, being here with you is an act of solidarity. Maybe instead of solidarity with a bunch of leftist lawyers, you could actually do your job as well, Sotomayor. And from the Federalist, John Roberts is the judicial supremacist the founders warned us about. If courts can strike down the other branch's actions, as Roberts is claiming, then that isn't co-equal. It's judicial supremacism. It's a sad day in America when the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court ignores the basic framework of the Constitution he's supposed to interpret. That's what happened when Chief Justice Roberts took it upon himself to subtly thumb his nose at President Trump and conservatives during a rare sit-down interview in his hometown of Buffalo, New York. In addition to rebuking calls to impeach activist lower court judges for overstepping the confines of the Constitution, which is the absolute exclusive right of Congress to do, the Chief Justice had this to say about the subject of judicial independence. In our Constitution, the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government, separate from the others, with the authority to interpret the Constitution as law and strike down, obviously, acts of Congress or acts of the President. That innovation doesn't work if the judiciary is not independent. The job is to obviously decide cases, but in the course of that, check the excesses of Congress or the executive, and that does require a degree of independence. The Chief Justice begins by claiming that the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government. Then, in the very next breath, he asserts that courts can strike down acts of Congress or acts of the President. If the courts can unilaterally strike down actions by the legislative and executive it believes to be unlawful or finds unfavorable, as Roberts maintains, then it isn't co-equal. It's judicial supremacism. What Roberts is conveying is his apparent belief that the Supreme Court and judicial branch, writ large, are wholly supreme to the other branches of government. That is, regardless of the will of the people, as expressed through their elected representatives, it is judges who will have the final say on matters of law and public policy. While courts play an important role in American society, this is the exact opposite of the system the Founding Fathers established in the Constitution. If anything, the judiciary was viewed by framers like Alexander Hamilton to be the weakest branch, as it lacked influence over either the sword or the purse. It doesn't have an army, and it doesn't control the money, and must ultimately depend on the aid of the executive arm even for the efficacy of its judgments. They can't even carry out a judgment that the court decides unless the executive says, okay, I'll carry out that judgment for you. The founders were not shy about sharing their fears of what would occur should the views of judicial supremacists like Roberts become reality. According to the Heritage Foundation, anti-federalist Robert Gates, quote, foresaw the possibility and warned against the danger of a Supreme Court with the vast discretion and outsized role often attributed to the court by many contemporary Americans. He feared an expansive version of judicial review that would empower the court not just to interpret the Constitution, but to determine its meaning on the basis of the judge's own opinions about the spirit of justice. That's like exactly what Roberts is saying he intends to do. Quote, Gates further contended that the Supreme Court would not only be supreme over all other courts, but that it would in fact be the supreme power in the government to be created by the Constitution. This supremacy, Gates contended, would follow from the court's power of settling for all other political actors the authoritative meaning of the Constitution. This authority would render the Supreme Court effectively superior to other branches of the federal government. Thomas Jefferson was also among those to express concerns about the judicial branch amassing virtually unchecked power. In an 1819 letter to Virginia Judge Spencer Roane, the nation's third president espoused fears that the Constitution would become, quote, a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape into any form they please. In other words, Jefferson worried that judges would become so emboldened that they would manipulate the Constitution and law to produce outcomes that they find to be personally favorable. Unfortunately, the founders' fears have been realized in the form of John Roberts. The Chief Justice's latest remarks are a further indication that he has no intention of stopping the judicial coup taking place in the lower courts or restraining the overreaching power of the Supreme Court. Instead, he would likely continue to advance the notion of judicial supremacy, leaving America's constitutional order and its people to suffer in the process. The way to address the judicial coup is to stand up, criticize judges individually and personally, criticize the justices of the Supreme Court individually and personally. So when we elect a representative for government, whether it's president or in Congress or any elected official, they can make changes to policy because people want those changes. All of this is going to be dealt with soon. If the coup continues, if the administration is unable to execute on its policy, especially all of the policy that they were elected to do, there will be a resolution to this conflict and the American people will win. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.